Hello. Welcome to day 3 of the Happy Ladder Review and Reboot series. My name is Jessica Silver and I am a resilience coach. I hope you're all having a really great week. It's an absolute scorcher here today, so I hope you're having as lovely a week as we are here. Over the last couple of days, we've looked at tools to help reduce stress. And looking at how we can focus our energy and attention on the things that will help us have the most benefit, and looking at how we can see things from a different viewpoint. Today's tool is a little bit different, but is also designed to help us look at things from a different point of view. And today's tool is a decision-making tool. Now, all of the tools that we're using this week are available as a little workbook, this kind of workbook, which you can download from the website, happyladder.org. And everything that I'm talking about today, including all of the examples, are available in there. If you do have a pen and paper, you might find it helpful for today's tool, but absolutely don't worry if not, it is all there in the workbook for you. So, decision making. Why are we looking at this as a tool? Well, indecision and uncertainty are two things that can actually really cause a lot of stress. Not knowing what's going to happen is really one of the most stressful parts of any kind of change. And deciding what we're going to do is often the most difficult part of that change. Being uncertain and being unsure of which way to jump is often much more difficult than any big change that you actually want to put in place. Now, if you're an indecisive sort of person, this kind of tool is really, really helpful because it helps put everything down on the page and helps you actually come to some clarity about what it is that you want to do. On the other hand, if you're a bit of a kind of impulsive decision maker, somebody that likes to jump on in and not spend ages agonizing over a decision, this tool is also quite helpful because it can help you dig in a little bit more into what it is that, into other things that you might not have thought about before you've made your decision. So, in the workbook or on a piece of paper, we're going to draw a big square, and we'll put this on the screen so that you can have a look at it as I'm talking. So we're going to have a square with a cross in the middle, which gives you 4 blocks. You can see that on the screen right now. So these 4 blocks, and we're going to work through them each in turn. Along the top, you can see what happens if and what doesn't happen if. And on the left-hand side, or my left, your right, you can see if I do it or if I don't do it. So we're going to start with the column that's headed what happens if. And we'll take a look at that first box. What happens if I do it? Now, this tool is really useful for decisions that are sort of a yes-no question. It doesn't really work out what should I do. It is a tool that is very useful to say, should I do X or should I do Y? If you want to compare X and Y, it's better to be able to run each scenario through the tool one by one and see what comes up. So in this particular example, use the example of should I move to Spain or should I move abroad? This was a personal example for me, a decision I made a couple of years ago. And these are the kind of things that were coming up when I was starting to think about this. So this column is quite straightforward. What happens if I do this? What are the benefits to me from doing this? What are the things that might be an issue if I do this? For example, I have the chance to learn a second language. I have the chance to experience living in a new culture. I have the chance to live abroad. These are all things that I get from doing this thing. If we look at the next box, which is what happens if I don't do it, this is the flip side, and is obviously the the things like, well, if I don't move abroad, what happens? Well, I stay where I am, which means potentially that I stay in my same job. But there are some positive, or not necessarily positive, but other things that perhaps become easier. Like I stay living nearer to my friends. Schooling choices become easier or more obvious. Even that I'm more financially secure because those sort of income things related to my previous job were all still in place. So this is kind of useful for just writing down all of the things. What happens if I do it? What happens if I don't? And this is useful for writing down sort of the impacts rather than the how do you do it. Try not to censor yourself with only putting positives or only putting negatives. Chuck down everything that you think of when that comes up for you. Now, if we look at the other side, the third box, which is what doesn't happen if I do it. So this is where the brain power is sort of challenged a little bit more, because it's easy to think that when we decide to do something or not to do something, that we only think about what actually does happen. We don't tend to think about the other side of what doesn't happen when we make a decision. Now, if you look at it from the other side, so some of the things I said that don't happen if I do it sort of appear in this column too. So what doesn't happen if I decide to move to Spain? Well, my corporate career doesn't continue, for example. I perhaps don't have access to and I call it bonuses, but what I mean is like things like paid holiday or sick pay or any of the sort of benefits that I got with my previous corporate job. Those don't apply if I decide to take this decision. But then there's also other things that are perhaps more internal, which are things like I won't live with the regret of not having done it. And this is where the what doesn't happen side can be really powerful, is that it helps bring forward some of the things that are perhaps less obvious to us when we're thinking about a decision. It's quite usual to write a pros and cons list for making a decision, but actually thinking what doesn't happen if I do this requires a little bit more thought and a little bit more digging in. A different example might be something like buying a car. You might decide, well, if I buy a car, what does it give me? Well, it gives me freedom, it allows me to be able to move around, I get to travel more. If you think about what doesn't happen if you do it, there might be some other impacts of deciding to buy that car. If there are other financial choices that you want to make, for example, if you want to buy a house or you have another sort of financial commitment, deciding to buy the car would mean that it's going to slow down, so it slows down buying the house. So that's what also would go into that what doesn't happen if I do this category. If we look at the last box, what doesn't happen if I don't do this? Okay, lots of negatives here. This can also be useful to say rather than what doesn't happen or what won't happen if I don't do this. So this is kind of related to it's the flip side of what happens if I do it. So what doesn't happen if I don't do it? I don't have the chance to learn another language fluently. I don't have the experience of living abroad. I'll never know what opportunities I might have passed up by not going. And I don't get to find out what it would have been like. Now, those are my internal thoughts. And we can look at how those things kind of start to come up when we're looking at that sort of negatives column. That they're not necessarily negative things, but they're what are the impact of not having done it. Because we sometimes think that doing nothing is kind of a safe place to be, but doing nothing is still a decision. Doing nothing still has an impact because we are choosing to not do something else. And there are things that don't happen because we don't do something, and they don't happen because we do something. That there is that other side to things. And by able to look at this from those different viewpoints, and it can take a while. I'm not going to lie, that actually getting really into the nitty-gritty of what goes into each of those boxes can be quite challenging. But actually it can really help to uncover what's actually important. And while you're filling out the box, I kind of urge you not to put any judgment on what you're writing down. Just write down what comes up for you. If I think about what happens if I do it, just write down everything that feels like it's relevant in terms of the what's happened. Try not to get into the how it's going to happen, focus on the what and the impact. When you think you've been through everything and the things that you've written down, everything that you want to say, take a look at it and think about which bits jump out at you, which bits are actually really important, and highlight the points that actually mean the most to you, and look at where in the boxes those are sitting, because actually they're not going to all be evenly weighted. Not all of them are going to mean the same thing to you. Some of them are going to have a huge impact on how you feel emotionally and what you want to do. And other things you're like, yeah, okay, so that's not going to happen. I don't really care. I don't mind. In fact, I want that not to happen. Have a look, see where the points are for you that really matter, and see how they line up. If you find that there are some really key things, both in the what happens if I do it and what doesn't happen if I don't do it, you're probably starting to find out that that's actually the decision that you need to make. If it's looking at if the things that are really important to you are the what happens if I don't do it, and what doesn't happen, and what happens if I don't do it, that those are the kind of, they also kind of sit together in a pair. So I kind of urge you to sit with it for a little while and see what's coming up for you when you look at all of those things, and to help you make that decision of whether you want to move forward with something or you don't. Now, obviously we've used quite a big example of moving abroad. It doesn't have to be anything as dramatic as that. You can use it for much more straightforward, should I do this kind of question, to make it much more simple. But you can use it for big stuff, you can use it for little stuff, but this tool really just helps you get a different perspective on how you look at making decisions, and potentially gives you a way of deciding how you're going to move forward. So that is our tool for today, day 3. Tomorrow we are going to look at something for making changes, and I really would urge you to bring a pen and pencil with you if you can for tomorrow's session, because it'll make it a lot more easy to participate if you have something that you can write with. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. I do hope we shall see you again tomorrow, and I look forward to seeing you. Thank you. Bye bye.